Kansas State just landed two more big-time offensive line commits out of the state of Texas. And if you're not paying attention to what Brian Lepak is doing on the trail, well, you're already behind. Let's talk about it right here on Locked On Kansas State.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, what's up, Wildcat Nation, and welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily home for all things K-State sports. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. Today, we're going to be talking recruiting trenches. Two athletic offensive linemen out of the state of Texas, the Lone Star State, are now Kansas State Wildcats. We're breaking them down, why these additions matter, and how Brian Lepak, the offensive line coach, is quickly turning into a recruiting superstar, recruiting force on the Kansas State staff, where Kansas State sits on the Locked On recruiting power rankings. We're going to end the show with that heading into the summer. This is how you build a contender, folks, and it starts in the trenches. So which new offensive line commit, Keegan Collins or Justin Morales, do you think is the best chance of becoming a future starter at Kansas State? And are you buying the stock at Brian Lepak as a long-term recruiting ace? I want to know your thoughts there. Drop your thoughts below in the comments. Hit that subscribe button while you're there. If you believe the Cats are building a Big 12 bully up front, trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by July 4th. As I mentioned, we're going to dig into the Texas two-step here. Collins and Morales, them committing, quick scouting breakdown, talk about their commitments, why those commitments matter on that first official weekend, that first official visit weekend, and what both players signal about K-State's national reach, right? That's a big deal, especially when it comes to the Big 12 and the state of Texas. Then talking about Brian Lepak being the guy, right? You can feel it. Lepak is not recruiting like a position coach. He's recruiting like a future offensive coordinator. And then the K-State, where are they in the Locked On recruiting power rankings? Are they even there at all? And how many teams from the Big 12 do we find in that rankings? I have Spencer McLaughlin from Locked On College Football talking to me to end the show on today. The rankings are just a snapshot, but the foundation of K-State is laying in this class, and it could be a blueprint. So where do they land among other players in the country? But let's get into this. There's a really fun episode today because we get to finally talk some Cruton. And Cruton is a real fun time for Kansas State because we had a great recruiting class last year, historic, if you will. And now the momentum, that roller coaster I continue to talk about on this show, has not gone down yet. And I don't see it going down anytime soon. We're doing a really good job keeping that momentum strong heading into the summer. And two offensive linemen commit. There was a lot of commits, actually. We're, I think, up to 4 commits so far from this official visit. We're going to get to the other ones on a different show later this week or maybe next week, just depending on how everything shakes out. But I want to talk about these two offensive linemen first because I think this is so important, building the trenches in the Big 12. And first, I want to start with Keegan Collins because this kid checks all the boxes to me. Big frame, multi-sport athlete, can move in space. He's only scratching the surface heading into 2026. And 24/7 scouting analyst Gabe Brooks put out a thing on his profile on 247.com, and I'm going to not read it verbatim, but there's really some things that I was really interested in with Keegan Collins. So first off, size and athletic background right off the bat is what I read from that. And it says, quote, "We're talking about a rising offensive tackle prospect with legit size, a multi-sport background. He throws shot put and discus." I mean, that's when you're talking offensive lineman and you're putting that together, count me in. That's always pops for an offensive lineman. I love that. His movement and athleticism. Okay. He's got a naturally high center of gravity. Don't let that fool you, though. This kid can move, show impressive mobility when pulling and climbing to the second level. And just based off what we're seeing from him and his size, according to 24/7, 6'6", 275, I'd assume probably going to try him at the tackle spot initially. But when you're talking about climbing to the second level, that's great, especially when you have speedy backs like Dylan Edwards, assuming he gets to play while Dylan Edwards is still at Kansas State. But we're all known for speed at this school. Off tackle runs, getting to the second level, count me in. But It's not just a pass issue, right? Or pass a run thing, pass protection development. As a junior, he held his own against quicker edge rushers, staying in front of the speed, which was a big box to check for a young tackle. Physicality on the move, still developing that punch in pass pro, according to Gabe here, but sometimes more of a catcher than a striker. But when he's moving, pulling, or climbing, that strike shows up a lot more. And going back to those shot put numbers, post a 48-foot 5-inch shot put this spring. Yeah, that's a real number. 48.5 feet, if you will. No, actually, just under 48.5 feet. 48 feet, 5 inches. And once we get those verified measurables, we're going to get even clearer picture what his long-term ceiling can be. I think this is a huge win for Kansas State here, getting Keegan Collins. And when you talk about some of these players that they won over, when some of these other schools, of course, there's plenty of them in the state of Texas that they got this win over. You talk about, just winning in the state of Texas is absolutely huge. But some of these teams that, that was possibly going after Keegan Collins. I mean, there was a crystal ball in for Texas Tech, and he winds up committing Kansas State after his first official visit. On3 has him as an 87.05, a 3-star ranking, national rank 690, the 54th offensive tackle in the country, and the 104th athlete out of the state of Texas. Take that as you will. So 88 for On3, if you round it up there, 87 for 24/7, and Rivals always has the weird number and is at 5.7. But all see him as a 3-star athlete. And hey, look, 4 players coming in, committing after 14 players come in this weekend, already get 4 commitments instantly, basically. That's huge. Collins, according to On3, held other offers from Arizona, Arkansas, Arkansas State, Boise State, Florida Atlantic, Lamar, North Texas, Oklahoma State, Sacramento State, Texas Tech, UCF, UTEP, UTSA, and Wazoo before committing to Kansas State. That's a huge list. That is a gigantic list for somebody who has a bunch of offers and pulls the trigger and commits to Kansas State on his first official visit. His first trip to Kansas State was on April 12th. Wildcats knocked it out of the park, apparently, called it the best trip of his recruiting process. And after a bit of time, rescheduled his visit and moved it up on the calendar. He wanted to be here. Sounds like those other offers didn't really matter. So gotta love that. Gotta love what you're seeing from there. Projection and potential sounds like it's something, ascending offensive line prospect here. High upside ceiling. Real good ceiling here. And, going back to what the 24/7 analyst said, very young for the class of 2026. That makes the developmental ceiling even more exciting. Yeah, even more exciting for sure. There's a lot of excitement going on in Manhattan right now. A lot of things to be pumped about. I mean, you're getting some really good pieces coming in. The trenches are being built in Manhattan. The Cats are now gaining momentum in one of the most competitive recruiting regions in college football. Gotta love it. You got to love it. Next, let's talk about the other offensive lineman who's just as good and might be on the interior side, which is best of both worlds when you're talking about the commitments for Kansas State. We'll do that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing. The NBA Finals is tonight. If you're listening to this on Thursday, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments, whether it's game-winning shots, breakout players. There's never been a time to get in on the action. If Indiana even wants a chance to win this game against OKC, the series, let alone just a game, they have to find a way to stop SGA. I don't know if that's possible based on how he's played all season long. That's why I'm personally taking SGA with the points. I'm taking SGA, basically anything. Points, assists, I'm all for it when it comes to the combined stuff. If I had to go ahead, because FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game. You can do before tip-off, and you can do it in live game. Player props, that's where I'm talking those SGAs. But you can also do same-game parlays, where you can add things together. And if SGA is on, OKC is probably winning the game. So count me in for an SGA player prop, a same-game parlay with OKC on the money line. That's where I'm leaning towards these games until I am proven otherwise, because so far, I don't know how you can beat OKC. If you're new to FanDuel, guess what? It's a perfect time to sign up. Even though we're already at the end of the NBA Finals, FanDuel is always there for you. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, guess what? You'll get $200 in bonus bets. So make every moment count with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. As I mentioned earlier, trying to get to that 1,000 subscriber mark by July 4th. We're doing really good. Last time I checked, 923. So if we can get that other 75 plus subscribers in about a month's time, I'd love that. It'd be great for the brand here on Locked On Kansas State. So thank you so much again for listening. If you're listening on audio form, I appreciate that as well. Those numbers are higher and higher every single month. We're getting more growth every month ever since we started this in basically early December. We're only just about 6 months in on this show. Month by month, we're getting better as we go. Haven't had a down month yet. So thank you so much for being everydayers and listening to this show. We're talking about the offensive lineman committing to Kansas State for the class of 2026. This class is already going to be exciting, by the way. We already got plenty of names to talk about. The names that we haven't got to yet, other than these two offensive linemen, even the ones that have committed and secured their commitment long before this official weekend that we haven't talked about in this show, we will dig into. Everybody will get their love on this show before the season's over. It's good for the brand. It's good for me too, because I want to learn them. I want to learn and make sure we know these players going in, right? So make sure we have that heading into the new season. I did it good with the portal, I think. I want to make sure we do it good with the recruitment. But Justin Morales is the next offensive lineman that gets committed, and this one could be seen as a surprise, just because maybe not many people had him on their radar to commit right away. But it just proves that Lepak is staying hot. And Kansas State was on a major heater this past weekend, getting Justin Morales from El Paso, Texas, according to On3, 84.9 ranking, 87 overall if you count On3's ranking. 24/7 also has an 87, Rivals 5.5. A national ranking for Morales, according to On3, 1,087, the 104th interior offensive lineman and 154th player in the state of Texas. It just shows how deep the state of Texas is, and that's why it's so important to recruit there, especially if you're a Big 12 school. We'll get to that in just a second. But so 3-star across the board, just like Keegan Collins. And this guy's fun to watch. I think he's going to be an interior lineman just based on his size. According to 24/7, 6'4", 265. I've heard that he's gone up to 275 already based on what they've seen as of lately. And I'll take that, especially what you have with the interior line possibly most likely moving on in the future. Got a lot of older players, upperclassmen on the roster right now. But going back to 24/7 scouting analyst Gabe Brooks, he had some thoughts about Justin Morales as well. Said P4 caliber prospect with positional flex. I mean, it says he's a power 4 level lineman. Perfect. No notes. I love it. But where he ultimately plays depends on his verified measurements. Right now he's listed at 6'4", 265, as I mentioned. But here's the plus side. 81.5-inch wingspan. That's huge. And to me, that screams interior offensive lineman. I mean, if you can have him as a pulling guard, have that size, work on double teams with the 1 technique or 3 technique defensive linemen, count me in. So hopefully we can see some good things from Justin Morales. Has 2A experience as well, and this could help when it comes to football IQ. Not just an offensive guy. Logged real snaps at left tackle and interior defensive line. So he did play left tackle at high school, but I think that does translate inside when he gets to Kansas State. That 2A experience gets him the edge in understanding leverage in hand combat. That football IQ, you can't underestimate that, especially when you're moving to such a high level. Now, I mean, Texas high school, I mean, that can almost be considered, close to the G5 level sometimes. And then going to the Power 4 level, that's usually a nice transition. It's better than some other state schools. It just is what it is. But it's still a huge transition. Going from Power 4 from high school, that's huge. So being able to have that 2A experience, having some decent kind of football IQ, something that maybe other players don't have, that's a competitive advantage right away. Multi-sport profile, also shot put and discus numbers are solid. Gotta love that. Movement skills, bending, capable bender, moves well. fluidity, possibly sticks on the outside. We'll see. I think he goes on inside, but the frame holds up on higher levels. Projection here, just based on what I'm reading and what we're seeing here, and this is all small numbers, right? But right now, he looks like a guy that could be a multi-year starter at a Power 4 level. And there might be even more upside if those tools keep developing. And obviously, that'll be what it's all for. And I'm not saying he's going to be the guy right away. But if we're talking a multi-level starter, and Kansas State's done a really good job at keeping these players around, retention has been huge as of lately, I'm all for it. And a lot of this is due to Brian Lepak at Kansas State. And we've said it before, but I think it's time to double down here. Brian Lepak is not wasting any time. Since his promotion from tight end coach to offensive line coach in February, he's already reeled in 3 offensive line commits. These 2 being 2 of the 3. And the message is loud and clear. The Wildcats are getting nasty in the trenches, dare I say again, or just continuing the narrative. Because the offensive line has been very good for quite some time. Even when we feel like it's a down year, it's still towards the top of the country when you look at other offensive lines. So since taking over in February, he hasn't just filled that role. He's flipped the switch on offensive line recruiting in Kansas State. 3 commits in 3 months. I mean, can you ask for anything more than that? That's not a slow build, folks. That's a trench war chest in the making. I love it. He came in hot. He's showing that he's not just here to coach linemen. He's here to stack future starters. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, the way he's recruiting, he's not recruiting like a position coach. He's recruiting like a future offensive coordinator. I love Matt Wells. Don't get me wrong. This is nothing to shade on Matt Wells, but I think Brian Lepak's got something real special, especially on this recruiting trail. The pattern, long athletes, multi-sport guys, kids with twitch. It's about developing that blueprint, and it looks like Lepak's got it. And you got to remember, he's a guy that's also played this position at a high level. Colorado State to Oklahoma. I mean, he knows what real Power 4, in this case, back when the day, Power 5, offensive linemen look like, because he was one. That's huge. To have that experience, we go back to the football IQ. He's got a brand. He's got a fit already. That multi-sport kind of athlete, that high football IQ guy. I think we're in for some really exciting things for Kansas State's offensive line in the future. Don't overlook this brain power. The dude's got an accounting degree as well, finance degree, and a law degree. He's sharp in the trenches and in the film room. So I love it. I absolutely love it. Is it too early to call Lepak one of the most important recruiters on the staff? I mean, so far, it sounds like he might be one of the best recruiters. He was even great when it came to his tight end work. Now it's working towards arguably the most important position group on the roster, the offensive line. The engine doesn't move without them. The unsung heroes. 3 commits this fast. I think we're seeing the next great position coach at Kansas State. And dare I say, he's on the fast track to being a coordinator. Got to find a way to lock him up if that's the case, because it might just not be good enough. Texas is the heart of Big 12 recruiting. Let's just be straightforward with it. You have to. When we're talking about all of these players that have committed this week, all came from the state of Texas. That's not by any surprise. That's not by coincidence, folks. If you want to win in the Big 12, you better win in Texas. It's simple as that. Nearly half of the Big 12 is either based in Texas or built off Texas high school talent. You can't sit out of this arms race. You can't. You can't do it. But every time that Kansas State wins these recruiting battles in Texas, especially when you go against Texas Tech, Baylor, TCU, heck, even Texas and Oklahoma still. Every time, it's another Kansas State flag planted deep in enemy territory. Because that's really what it is. You're at a disadvantage. And Lepak, Klieman, the rest of this recruiting staff, this coaching staff, is proving that let them doubt us. Let them. It doesn't matter. We're going to win these battles anyways. We'll bring in Keegan Collins. We'll bring in Justin Morales. We'll bring in some of these other players we'll talk about in the future here that also committed this week. So we got plenty to talk about. Some studs, some athletes, quarterback. It boosts brand awareness in this hotbed of Texas high school. Texas kids committing to Kansas State gets the brand in the more locker rooms, more 7-on-7 circles, more coaching networks. Every win in this recruiting window, especially from the state of Texas, is huge. More than just the name, more than just the 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, you name it. Doesn't matter. It's huge. It goes a lot farther. And not just for the class of 2026, for 27, 28, basically as long as Chris Klieman is in charge. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. Texas recruits travel well, too. I mean, when you pull from Texas, you're getting players who have already faced elite speed, talent, pressure, that high football IQ we keep talking about, translates quickly usually to the Big 12. There's a reason so many Texas players play early. There's a reason why so many are recruited at a high level. They come from big-time programs, and they're ready for that next stage. They're ready for that big stage of the Big 12. You got to love it. You don't have to out-recruit Texas or Texas Tech or Oklahoma. You don't have to out-recruit them. You just have to win the right battles. And I think we get that more and more when we talk about fit. I think fit is becoming way more important these days, especially when there's a battle of money on these recruiting trails. And although Kansas State's in a nice spot there with revenue sharing, NIL, all that stuff coming up, they're not at the they're not the top. They're nowhere close. They're in a good spot for them. You know, K-State's doing exactly that, though. They're winning the right battles, quietly building a future Big 12 bully. And I mean, future Big 12 bully. They are a Big 12 bully. One Texas commit at a time. When you look at the entire recruiting rankings as a whole, though, is Kansas State even towards the top when you add in the SEC, the Big 10, and things like that across the Power 4 and the rest of college football? Well, Brian Smith of The Portal dropped the official Locked On Podcast Network recruiting rankings, and I had Spencer McLaughlin join me because I had a bone to pick with them. We'll do that next right here on Locked On Kansas State.
Our Big 12 coaches being overlooked. Kalani Sitake, Kyle Whittingham, keep going down the list. Chris Klieman, none of them make Brian Smith's list of the best recruiting head coaches in all of college football. Christian Rauh of Locked On Kansas State here to discuss just that. So let's pull up this list that our guy Brian Smith of the Portal Podcast put together. Kirby Smart, number 1 for the best recruiting. We're just talking recruiting head coaches in all of college football. Mario Cristobal 2, followed by Ryan Day, Dan Lanning, James Franklin, Marcus Freeman, Hugh Freeze, Dabo Sweeney, Fran Brown at Syracuse with an ACC representation over there, Lane Kiffin, Mike Elko, and Brent Venables, his top 12. Christian, is it blasphemy to not have a Big 12 coach on there in your view, or do they need to up the ante on the trail?
Well, I think they should change the title to this from not the top coaches from recruiting, but the most spending when it comes to recruiting, because I think that's what comes hand in hand here is you get the amount of money to take care of whatever needs to be done, and that's where the case may be. But, you know, even though I'd love to put Chris Klieman from Kansas State up there, the fact that you don't have Texas Tech there after what we've seen this offseason, what they've spent, now I know that a lot of that's transfer portal, but you know that's bending over and bleeding into recruiting as well, Spencer. I think that's egregious. I really do think that at least you should have Texas Tech on that list. You see some things like Syracuse on there at the moment. That's probably one that really glares out to me and goes, are they supposed to be there? But the fact you don't have Texas Tech, you don't have BYU, and you don't have other teams in the Big 12, it's really weird. It's a really weird thing, and I think they missed the ball here, Brian. I think you did.
Right now in the 2026 recruiting rankings, and we're into the summer months at the very least, we've passed the stage of it's too early to draw any conclusions. Like, no, you can't draw final conclusions yet, but we've got some serious data points here. And by the way, you know which Big 12 team has been in the top 15 in the recruiting rankings according to 24/7 for the longest stretch of time, Christian? Can you, the Kansas State guy, guess who that is?
Is it Kansas State?
No, it's not. It's not. It's the Jayhawks of Kansas. Lance Leipold and company have been getting it done. I don't know how I don't know how sustainable it is, but they're in there. Arizona State's in the fold. I've talked about their recruiting for quite a while here on the show because they have immense potential on the trail. And as much as I like Kalani Sitake as a head coach and think that he had the potential to be included on this list, I think Kenny Dillingham is the biggest oversight. When you look at what has happened, by the way, recruiting encompasses the high school and transfer portal ranks, in my view, because that's how rosters get put together nowadays. I think to not have Dillingham on the list with what he's done at ASU, the situation that he took over. I'm not saying there aren't other good and capable coaches on this list, but you have to think about what a coach has to work with at his particular school. Mike Elko and Brent Venables are both good coaches. Do I inherently think that they've shown they could do more with less from a recruiting and development standpoint like Kenny Dillingham can? I haven't seen that, Christian, because I saw the team pick last in the Big 12, go out and win it this past year. Meanwhile, Texas A&M was improved, but not winning a conference championship. Oklahoma actually took a step back in Brent Venables' third season. And the talent and recruiting has definitely been there for Oklahoma and Texas A&M, but the resource gap is substantial. I think Dillingham is the biggest oversight, personally.
No, that's a good point. And I probably just should also say that as well. The fact that I looked him over is maybe why Brian did it as well. And Dillingham's been in the news lately trying to put himself back on the map, put Arizona back on the map, making them be considered a blue
Arizona State. Don't leave out the state. Richie Bradshaw of Locked On Sun Devils will have my head.
Did I say that?
You did.
Okay. Yeah. I would hate it if someone left out the state in Kansas as well, as we mentioned earlier in this opportunity. So I apologize. But when I look at these recruiting rankings, how much does it matter that maybe one of these teams get like a 5-star? And we're talking 2026, like 1 5-star. You don't see a lot of 5-stars come to the Big 12. It doesn't mean they don't have great recruiting classes. When you go to the NFL draft and you go to these Big 12 conference games, they are great players. And they're players that stay in the NFL and stay in college football and have great things for years to come. Now, I'm not taking anything away from the Big 10 and the SEC. I understand where they're at when it comes to recruiting, and especially because of money. But the fact that you leave every single Big 12 program off this, and I'm still going to fight for Texas Tech, although On3 has them pretty low on their rankings. I'll still fight for BYU. You make a very good point for Arizona State there. Arizona State, make sure I say it for the second time the right way. But it doesn't. I think the 5-star thing's overrated. When you look at the recruiting thing, if you can get a 5-star guy, does that mean that you're a top recruiter? It shouldn't always mean that way. I think fit is way more important than talent, especially in the best conference in college football, the toughest college conference, and that's the Big 12. Parity from top to bottom.
Well, I disagree with you there. I am a stars matter crowd sort of guy. They do not mean or everything. They do not guarantee anything. I don't think it's a coincidence that over the last 10, 15 years, the programs that have had the best average recruiting classes are the ones that are at the top of the sport year in and year out. And I do think for the Big 12, Drake and I earlier on today's show were talking about the playoff and how they get teams in and competing and all that sort of stuff. I do think there needs to be the sort of investment in talent acquisition that you see at Texas Tech, that you see at BYU, that Dillingham is trying to do at Arizona State. It can't just be 3 programs. It doesn't need to just be 3 programs. I know the finances aren't exactly the same as they are in the Big 10 or the SEC, but I think one of the ways that in the years to come, you see more Big 12 teams in the playoff, you see them, garnering more respect nationally. And, there's plenty of brand bias that is out there, but brand bias is built on years and years of winning and stacking recruiting classes. And I think that for the Big 12, they've got to find a way to go out and not necessarily go out and land, they're only like 20-ish, I think, 5-star recruits, if that, in a given cycle. There aren't that many, but they've got to be able to stack top 25 classes, I think, as a conference year in and year out, and then have someone every now and then creep inside the top 10. Right now in 24/7's rankings, they've got them inside the top. They have 4 Big 12 teams inside the top 25. If that trend were to hold and you get a couple that are maybe even inside the top 15 when the year comes to a close, I do think that can help shift the perception of the conference. And we all know, whether you like it or not, the perception of your league and of your school matters a great deal, especially if we go to a 5+11 playoff format, which is essentially an extension of what we've been having or what we just had in the 12-team era, where it's the 5 highest ranked conference champs and the committee picks everybody else. Well, the committee's perception of your school is going to matter. And yes, recruiting rankings do indeed play a role, whether you like that or not.
Yeah, if we disagree or agree on anything, the one thing I think you and I can definitely agree on is exactly what you said at the end there. The bias and the thought process of what the committee is going to have based on your recruiting and your talent level, your program level, it's at an all-time high. And I think what we've seen from the past playoffs, these things do matter. And I think you're right there. The money is going to be a big deal. Will the 5-11, that potential new playoff format, change the way that money is changed? Maybe the fact that maybe 2 Big 12 teams can be in every single year, 2 or 3, not with the automatic qualifiers, that'll be yet to be determined. But the fact that they're still left off this list in a team like Syracuse, who's still building up, is on this, that one drives me nuts, Spencer.
Yeah, I mean, I respect Fan Brown a lot. I think he is one of the up-and-coming coaches in all of college football. Show me what he's done that Kenny Dillingham hasn't on the trail, which is specifically what we're talking about here, and then by extension on the field as well. But again, the list, I'll throw it up one more time for the YouTube audience. This is top 12 recruiting head coaches and your ability to put together talent. I'm hard-pressed to see how Kenny Dillingham is not on this list, and I think there's some, like, I think Hugh Freeze is maybe slightly overvalued there, but that also might be the record perception creeping into my head. But no Big 12 coaches in there in the eyes of Brian Smith. We like Brian, but you know what? Like everybody, sometimes Brian just misses. Christian Rauh, Locked On Kansas State. Great as always, my man. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.